So here it is. Now Ubi's opened the door. Can we have our skip boss fight button? No. Seriously. Anyway, Ubisoft hasn't opened any door. And this is where it touches on using the discovery mode, which is a completely different thing from skipping a boss fight. A mode that, you know, in all intents and purposes, you've got to unlock different portions of it by playing the game, apparently. And it won't advance the story. There is no story to it. It's just, you know, history and things about the different stuff, like, you know, the Nile, the pyramids, and other stuff. That's not the same thing as a skip button for a boss fight to advance the story. But let's get into this. Ubi made a fascinating announcement this week. They revealed their latest Assassin's Creed is to add a discovery tour mode, removing all combat and challenges from the game to let players just really experience their in-depth recreation of ancient Egypt. It's fascinating to me, because it's a big deal, and goodness me, it shouldn't be a big deal, but games should be delighted to include modes that remove all their difficulty and challenge, and players should cheer when they hear about it. Why? See, this is why it has to have its own little video. We're gonna call the Discovery Tour this awesome thing, and to be honest, it is. It's not bad, but it doesn't advance the story. It doesn't reward you for doing it. It is its own little thing that increases in value, essentially, the more of the story you actually go through and play, so you can get more out of it. It is literally just a tour mode that tells you different things about the history of the place and the places that you're visiting. It's sort of like a nice little educational walkthrough type thing without actually going into the story itself. But the fact that we're going to conflate this to we should be able to progress through the story without actually playing the game, those are two different things. I lie on that fence that if you buy a game, you buy it to play it. I don't want to pay $65 or something for a movie. I mean, that's what this whole idea of skipping the boss fight or skipping combat essentially is. You don't want to play the game, but you want all the benefits of getting the story. And we'll talk about that real quick. A nice recap function would be pretty cool, but something that unlocks after you beat the game. So, say you played through Assassin's Creed, we'll say 1, and then when you beat it, you unlock Recap, which is sort of a recap that they've put together, where it shows all the major events and everything else. And when Assassin's Creed 2 dropped, it's been a while since you played 1, but you want to sort of recap on what happened. I'm okay with that idea too. So you go back and you've already beaten it, so you've unlocked the recap. You click the recap and you go ahead and for the next, hour or 2 or 3 or whatever, however long the recap is, you sit there and you watch it instead of actually playing through it. Let's say 20 some hours it took you to play through it, so it doesn't take you near as long to get through it, so you can recap the story and then dive head first into Assassin's Creed 2, remembering fully pretty much what happened in 1 and how they're tying together. And that honestly sounds like a great idea, but it's got to be a reward for after you beat the game, not something beforehand. And that's like the only way I would even condone such a thing. And the reason I even got that idea, I guess, was from Final Fantasy Advent Children, the movie, where they actually have a recap mode for Final Fantasy VII, essentially, where it goes through the story bits and stuff through FF7, so you can get caught up, just in case, you hadn't played it since the game came out, and you need to recap a little bit, kind of thing. That sounds like a good idea. But then again, I wasn't paying, $65 for that movie either. I was paying a lot less. But let's continue. Oddly enough, a lot of players don't cheer. In fact, people can get awfully angry about it. Since the announcement I've seen on Twitter, a combination of people declaring, "Hooray! I'm interested in playing Assassin's Creed for the first time in years," alongside other pointing towards those utterly furious that it demands their hobby cheapens games, and most heinous of all, let in the riffraff. Yeah. Let's get into this. First off, those who are going, "Hooray, I'm excited for Assassin's Creed," might be into a rude awakening when they realize they can only go into one part without actually playing the game. And again, why in the world would you want to pay about $60 for a game if you're not going to play it? But at the same time, a fool is soon parted with their money, so that's on them, I guess. This is the first time in years they've been excited just because of this one little tour. But at the same time, I can also understand others when you first learn about this and don't have any details, that it will cheapen the game because you think you're going to be able to advance said storyline through this tour mode and go through the story without actually playing the game, which isn't true either. So I get that. I'm not playing dumb here. I'm not being coy. I know an awful lot of what made gaming culture such a miserably toxic environment over the last few years. It deeply wrapped up in a subject like this, and those who spread the toxicity are those most likely to be on the side of condemning gaming options that remove challenge, that makes the hobby more accessible to crowds. But at the same time, I'm not going to allow the sewage to pollute my opinions and my delight in expressing those opinions. And I've long been arguing, and gaming can be a far better place if the industry would only introduce the skip boss fight button. No. Yes, of course, skip boss fight is a totem for a larger point here, and it is titled under which I'd include Ubi's recent announcement, despite their rather awkwardly trying to wrap it all up as wanting to be edumacational. Does that actually say edumacational? Look, I know I like to joke and say I'm edumacated because I live in the South, but seriously, you physically wrote out edumacational. Anyway. Educated, or educational. Anyway, it's the spirits such as option captures, and it's one that I think the industry would be well to breathe deeply into their souls. Yeah, the skip fight, or the skip boss fight, or the skip combat phase. The whole point to playing a game is to go and play the game. There's a lot of games that rely solely on the combat. Things like RPGs, maybe not so much. You run around the open world, whatever, run into a battle, you fight, and sometimes that can get really repetitive depending on how the encounter rates are, and trust me, some games have overdone their encounter rates to where you walk 2 steps and you hit another battle and you really furiously just want to press a button to fast forward through it. But that's a whole other reason behind that. It's not because you want to skip it because you just don't want to play it, or, well, you do skip it because you don't want to play it, but you're not skipping it just because you have no desire for the combat or whatever. That's part of the game. Things like, say, Doom, that's all the game is. It is essentially combat, and then story, the CGI furthering the story, along with other things. Like, say, Metroid, among other games. That's part of the thing. If you're constantly pressing X to skip the combat or something, or press this to skip the boss, you can miss out on a lot. That boss comes in, gives you some important dialogue, and then you press to skip the button, you know, it feels like it cheapens the experience. You got to pass on without actually handling the challenge at hand. That's where a lot of people get upset. You know, you're playing the game, and if you're going to just skip all the challenging parts, what's the point of even playing it at that point? You've built yourself up to a certain point so you can continue onward, and sometimes you may run into a boss you just can't beat because you haven't you've skipped through things. I mean, is this going to be like an option to skip every fight, and then you get to the final boss, but then that one isn't skippable? Because that would be trolling in its best format. It's like, you get to skip every fight, but when you get to the last one and you want to see the ending, you've got to fight the boss. But if your characters are still sitting at level 1 because they haven't done anything all game, the boss totally wrecks you, and it doesn't give you an option to skip. And that would be hilarious to see, to be honest. I actually want that to happen now. I want somebody to implement this skip combat, skip boss thing, and then throw in certain spots into the game where you can't skip it, just to watch these people get rolled, and then complain about it. That would just be hilarious. But anyway, continuing. This is ground I've covered before, and each time there's been a very similar reaction. In 2009, I suggested it was draft that I'm not able to just skip ahead while playing a game, like I could in a film or a book or a TV show. Of course that's daft. I wrote back in 2012 about the idea of being able to skip any fight. As a reaction to the despicable responses to BioWare's Jennifer Helpless suggesting that game combat should be skippable, of course it should. Last year I talked about how deeply peculiar it is, the notion, or a perceived notion, that people have to be good at games for them to properly enjoy them. Of course they don't. And in light of the semantics that shouldn't be, announcements regarding Creed, I'm sorry, it should be Assassins, but it's literally ASS capital C-R-E-E-D. Ask Creed Unity. I think we're trying to make a joke and I'm just missing it. Anyway, I want to retaliate once more. Let other people play games their way. You know, I'm fine with people playing games their way. It really is. But when you got a game that does focus on combat and, you know, with boss fights, I'm not okay with skipping them. Although, then again, if they throw in unskippable portions and then you ain't got anything leveled, I'm kind of okay with that. Yeah, I'm a tad bit okay. I just don't like the idea of rewarding a player for doing absolutely nothing. You know, one of the parts of gaming and enjoying it is to play the game. And if you don't play the game, you know, what's the point? You don't have to be good, like insanely good, to play a game or to enjoy it. You can play it the way you want to. But then again, if you don't have some sort of skill and some sort of competence at playing it, you're not going to enjoy it. Which is why you want this ability to just skip all the action portions of a game and go on. I mean, seriously, think Gears of War. Every time you've got to get into a firefight, you just skip it. Or you hit a button and the game plays itself for you to go through it. At that point, you're watching a TV show, a movie, or a book. And you shouldn't be able to skip through it. You should be able to go through it, and the reward for playing the game is furthering the story. That's what a game is about. It's just, you want to further the story, but in order to further the story, you've got to play the game. Therefore, the game rewards you for playing it by furthering the story. And the story can be insanely good. There have been plenty of games where the story has been great, and I can't wait to get back and figure out how to get past this one part so I can continue playing. I mean, I remember it took me a long time at one point to figure out a puzzle on Breath of Fire 3. Yes, Breath of Fire 3. Way back then, there was a part that I just could not get past. Didn't really have the internet or anything that prevalent where I could just look up the answers or anything like that. No. I had to, actually figure it out eventually. And it took me a while. And, surprisingly enough, it came to me in a dream one night. Here I was, apparently dreaming of the game because I'd like to get past that part and continue the story and see what happens. Yeah, I figured it out in my dream, got up and was like, is it really that simple? Booted up the system, turned on the game, sure enough, did it, saved it, was like, alright, going back to bed. And I was able to move forward from there. But of course, nowadays, if you get stuck, you could always look it up on the internet. I mean, that's the thing. But, you had to work at it. Work to move forward and go somewhere in a video game. You couldn't just hit a skip button. Hit a button and just skip it. But, yeah. It took me a while just to get through that part. But let's continue. The reaction against these thoughts is one of us and them, and a desire to keep them from getting near us. Them are all ordinarily inexpert, mediocre, or worse of all, new. While us are expert, experienced, hardcore elites. But let us reject that silliness and embrace the idea that welcoming the outsider in is always how society broadens and blooms. Never mind, there are plenty of people already here who are looking for different and more varied experiences. Yeah, I don't think that's anywhere close to the proper reaction of us and them. It's more like us are gamers, and them are people who have no real desire to play the game, but for whatever reason want to experience the story of the game. This idea of trying to compare video games as a media, as books, TV shows, and movies, and it's like, I could just skip ahead to the end of Game of Thrones. My question is, why? I don't understand the people who do that at all. I mean, I know there are people out there. I've heard people who say, they'll pick up a book and they'll read the ending paragraph or something before they decide they really want to get into it and go through. But for me, I'm just sitting here thinking, if you already know the outcome, what's the point of reading everything in between? I just don't get that. If you jump to the end of a TV show to see how it ends, to see that, so-and-so died at the end of the episode, it's lost its surprise factor. It's lost everything at that point because you already know what's going to happen. That's why spoilers are such a thing that people are worried about sometimes, because they don't want to be spoiled on something, then somebody spoils it for them. They spoil the fact that... Okay, spoiler alert on The Force Awakens. Han dies. That got thrown out there. And if you didn't want to get spoiled on that because you didn't know that was coming, it takes a lot of the impact out when it actually happens. And this idea of wanting to skip ahead feels like nonsense on this point. The us are gamers. The us are the experienced, the elite, the hardcore, the ordinary, the inexperienced, the mediocre, and the noobs of gaming. That is the us. In reality, the them are those who just want to skip everything, skip all the play elements. They may want to walk from city to city, but they don't want to go through all the fighting and the boss battles and the puzzles that go along with it. They just want to skip to the ending. And considering video games as a medium to be played, if that's the experience you want, where you can go and skip to the end or something like that, where you can just sit there and watch it, it's why Netflix is around, and Hulu, and streaming, and TV, and, you know, movies, and DVDs, and books. Those medium, you can skip to the end if you want to. You can skip the opening credits. You can skip the ending credits. You can skip this, that, and the other. You know, that's something you can do in those. But when it comes to video games, you know, you're sitting there watching the TV, but video games is a medium that needs to be played to enjoy it fully. I just can't grasp the concept of somebody wanting to play the game without playing the game. That's where a lot of people are getting upset, I guess, about it. And it's like, you want to skip all the crucial stuff to the game, all the things that make the game, but we don't want to. But yeah. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end this real quick. This is starting to get long, so I'm going to cut this up into multiple parts. We'll finish this in the next part, hopefully. Till then, I'll see you. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment, smash that like button, and always subscribe for more. And of course, there are other videos floating around somewhere on the screen, so click one of those and see if you can find something that suits your fancy. Till then, I'll see you later. Bye.